can do it.
Oh, lost
Look
it.
at that. I planned that the whole time.
Welcome back to the channel, everyone. Michael with RC Crawling. Today we're going back to the C10. We're going to be installing a new brushed motor and the Injora MB100 ESC. This was a upgrade that, what was it? It was intimidating when I first started. I was real nervous about pulling the transmission out, having all the gears fall out, but I think after watching this video, you'll find it's not that challenging, and let's just dive into it. So this is what we're working with today. We're going to use the Injora 66 turn brushed motor. It does come with a new motor plate and in pinion gear, I think. Yes, pinion gear that we'll need to push onto the output shaft. I don't have a pinion puller or pusher, but I'll show you how I push these on. And then this is the external ESC. This is the Injora MB100 brushed ESC. It's going to help get a better slow crawl. It does come with multiple wires. These are the only two we're using. This is for the motor to the PH2 connector. And then this is to connect to our receiver. These do come on one end with a little tab on the side. You'll need to cut that off. I don't know why it comes with it. This one I've already cut off. This is actually an old original MB100. So it has the 50% reverse instead of the 80% reverse like the new ones. But this is fine for this build. We'll get into the truck and start taking the transmission out so we can put the new motor plate and motor in, and then we will hook up the ESC and hit the rocks. I've actually got another Injora Red 66 turn motor. This is what I used in my Power Wagon for my first motor upgrade. So, if you follow other YouTubers, you will have seen this Power Wagon recently on Cape Crawlers for the King of the Course series. It did pretty well. I'm pleased with it. I learned a lot of what I know about these crawlers from Adam and watching his videos. So shout out to Adam. He's been a big help in me getting into this hobby. So as you can see on this motor, the pinion gear is just to the end of the output shaft. And you can see there's a part of the gear that does not have teeth. That goes closest to the motor. So we're going to take our pinion, and I just get it started like that with my fingers, and then turn it upside down and just gently but firmly press it on the table. So now our pinion gear is installed. So that'll turn our spur gear in our transmission. Well, with that sorted, I'm going to get the body taken off the C10 so we can get to the parts we need, and we'll start pulling the transmission out. I've got the body off. We're going to be using our 0.05 hex. Hello. Anyways, you get the idea. 0.05 hex head. We are going to need to take this battery tray out, and you can tell that the stock motor is shorter than the motor we're putting in. So this is a 50 sized can brushed motor. The stock motors are 30 sized can motors. And you might notice when we hold this up to compare, this leg is in the way on our battery tray. So we're also going to have to sort that out. So we're going to unscrew it. Since we've relocated our shocks, our shock is screwed into the back of the battery tray. So you'll have 4 screws, your shock, and this screw here, and same on the other side. I'm going to go ahead and pull those out and get the tray off and talk about what we're going to do next. All right, battery tray is removed. We can now easily get to our motor and transmission. And it sits in here like this, so this leg on our battery tray is going to have to go. It will not harm the performance to do this. It's not going to make it weaker or more likely to break. I'm going to use these clippers. And we're just going to chop this right off here. Velcro's in the way. Right. So problem solved. Now that new motor will fit. And it is time to pull our transmission and motor together. So we're going to unplug our motor from our ESC receiver combo. Going forward, we're going to be using this only as a receiver. To get the transmission and motor assembly out, there's one screw here on the top. So we're going to start by taking that out. And then underneath on the bottom of the skid plate, these 2 screws screw into the bottom of the transmission. And so, with those screws removed, our drive shafts are still attached, but we take the whole assembly out. So that's the transmission and the motor. So we're going to need to take our drive shafts, at least the back drive shaft, off. I think we can leave the front one on. So to take the drive shaft off, there's one screw. It's a little tight, but just pull it off. We do need to get the cover off of our transmission, so let's go ahead and pull the front drive shaft off. And to get to the screws that hold the motor on, we're going to remove these two screws. Now with those two screws removed, the cover comes off, and what we're looking at here is part of the transmission. We've got our motor with the pinion gear, and that meshes with this spur gear. This is held on by a lock nut, and we are going to need to take our spur gear off to get to these two screws that hold the motor onto the motor plate. So for that, we will need our 4.0 box. Or same tool you use to take your wheels off. Take the lock nut off, and then the spur gear comes off. Let's talk about the spur gear for just a second. So you'll notice on the side that was facing us, facing outwards, that you can see there's a little bit of a nub. On the side that faces the motor, that nub is bigger. So this has to go on a certain way. This is going to face the back towards the motor plate. This is going to face us when we put the screw back on. So just remember how that's oriented, because it'll matter when we put it back together. Now that we've got the spur gear off, we're going to unscrew this. We're going to need a bigger tool. I think it's been a minute since I've worked with these brush motors. I'm going to try 1.5 millimeter. That's too big. So 1.3 should be the ticket. That's too small. This is like a USB. We'll go back to 1.5. I always have to plug a USB in 3 times. One way's wrong, flip it over, it's still wrong, flip it over again, and then it plugs in. I don't know how that works. You'll notice these screws are bigger head and stubbier. We're going to set that aside, as we'll use those to screw our new motor back in. So, stock motor, don't need that anymore. They're not bad motors. I actually used the MB100 ESC with this stock motor, and it was really smooth. It was a little underpowered still, but if you don't feel like swapping your motor, just grab the MB100 ESC. It's 23 bucks, and it's going to make you a lot happier with the slow crawl that you get from your crawler. So this is the stock transmission and motor plate. Our new motor, the holes don't line up. So you see we've got 2 mounting holes on here, 2 mounting holes here, but they don't line up. So that's why we're going to have to change our motor plate. To do that, we're going to go back to our 0.05 hex head, and we're going to take these 4 screws out. When you take the last one out, this transmission can come completely apart. So just make sure you hold it together as you get that last screw out so you don't dump it all out. So I'm keeping my screw piles somewhat organized. I've got all the same screws over here that I used for everything else. This screw is longer, so I'm going to start a pile over here with the longer screws, so I know those go back into our transmission. All right, so with those out, I'm holding the transmission together. That plate falls right off. And we can stick our new plate right here. And we'll screw that back down. You notice we've got extra holes now so we can get our new motor mounted. But let's just open this up so we can demystify the whole transmission situation. We've got bearings. So our spur gear spins this shaft and spins these other gears. Actually, our spur gear sits on this post. So spins this one, spins the big gear, and that's the output to our drive shafts. So if it falls apart, that's how it goes back together. We'll put that case back on. Put the motor plate on there. And we'll just screw this back together. And again, you don't want to over tighten these. You're going into plastic. You'll strip it out. You don't want your transmission falling apart when you're crawling. But just when it starts to give you a little resistance, that's tight enough. That's why I tend to screw it with my fingers on the skinny part of the shaft so I'm not able to get too much torque and strip my screws out. So it seems kind of crazy not to use the handle. There's a method to my madness. If your hands are cramping from using such tiny tools, go ahead and use the handle. It'll be fine. Just be careful. So new motor plate on there. That's not the right motor. This is the one we want. So now you can see our screw holes are accessible. We are going to get our, not those screws, our little fat short screws. And you can probably tell I like to get the screw on the hex head. Makes it a whole lot easier to get it started. So right now I'm not tightening this down all the way. I'm going to leave it loose because we need to adjust our mesh. All right, so that's on there, but it's loose. We're going to put our spur gear oriented the correct way. So big nub on the back, skinny nub on the front. And that's going to slip on right there. And now we can make sure our gear mesh is good. So it looks like those gears are meshing well. You don't want it too tight. You don't want it too loose. That looks about good. I'm going to go ahead and tighten that one down a little bit. And then pull that back off and tighten this other screw down. This is going into metal, so you can put a little bit more torque on it. Not much. You don't want to strip it. That feels good. It's spinning freely when I move it with my fingers. Got the pinion back on, not the pinion, the spur gear back on. And now we'll put our lock nut on. Do not over tighten this. You're going to burn out your motor if you do. So again, I'm just looking at that space. And it's kind of hard to see, but screw it down a little bit, check the spacing, Screw it down. It's about tightened. I'm going to back off just a bit so it's not pinching and causing undue stress on your motor. I'm going to back it off a little bit more and see if that feels any smoother. That feels good. So it's just barely tight. If you crank down on that, you're going to bind up the transmission. It's not going to spin freely and your motor is going to get hot and burn out real fast. So with that all screwed back on, we can put our cover plate back on there. And this doesn't need to be tight at all. When it's just a cover plate to keep dust off and out of the gears and the transmission. So again, just watching that spacing, and made contact, that's tight enough. If you care, you can orient your motor so it says Injora on the outside, because that's what you're going to see from the side. I wasn't paying attention. I don't really care. I have cared in the past. We will put our drive shafts back on. If you've forgotten how this is oriented, it sits in here like that. So we're going to have our short front drive shaft on the front. These drive shafts do have the D-shaped hole. Has a D-shaped output shaft. Some aftermarket drive shafts don't have the D-shaped hole. It doesn't really make a difference. So this will only fit on here one direction. So you can see it's lined up. We will grab one of our screws. And you may need to wiggle this around to get that screw to go all the way in. There we go. This also doesn't need to be too tight, but you want to make sure that you do get it screwed down so that screw head is recessed into the drive shaft. So otherwise it can contact the case and it's not going to be good. So we'll do the same on the rear facing drive shaft. There we go. Still moves good. Before we go any further, let's test it. So we're going to, for now, just plug the motor into the motor port. Grab battery. And I did a bad thing. I turned the truck on before the remote. We'll turn that on. Seems good to me. So it's moving nice and slow all the way through the high speed. If your motor is stuttering, I'm just trying to do that with the throttle. Something is too tight. So this is a good point to stop and check your work. I'm satisfied with that. So we can go install our transmission again. And since we took our drive shafts apart, the other half of the drive shafts are still attached. We're going to need to make sure we phase these when we put them back in. I'm going to do that off camera. It's a little fiddly, but like we talked about before, we've got the screws aligned on here. And then when we get them installed front and rear, we're just going to spin it so we can see the screws. That'll make sure our drive shafts are in phase. So I am going to do that, and I'll join you again once I've got that installed. Got my drive shafts back together. This is just sitting here still. Tip for doing this, do your back drive shaft first and then your front drive shaft. I've always found that the easiest way to do it. So we're ready to get the transmission and motor mounted back in here. I'm going to start with this top screw. And I'm just going to get that snug. Doesn't need to be tight. So now our transmission and motor won't fall out when we turn it upside down. Get these two bottom screws through the skid put in. So now motor and transmission are back installed. We can put our battery tray back in place. And you can tell we did have to clip that leg. It would not fit otherwise. Actually, on this side, the only screw we have now to screw in is our shock tower or shock top. That's on there. On the other side, we still have the two screws, so one of those is still our shock. So getting that screwed back in through the frame rail into the battery tray. All right. So we're back together. Probably should have routed this better before I screwed that tray down, but no problems. Just another point to check our work. If you don't want to do the ESC at this time, you can just keep running the combo. We're going to hook this up and just make sure seems good to me. If you start testing it and you're getting a lot of the chassis doing this, something's too tight. But we're not getting much of that, and that's called torque twist. If I had more room, you can nail the gas and it becomes more apparent. But it seems like everything's moving smoothly. It doesn't sound like it's shrieking, really just working too hard. So that's good. So motor install complete. Not too bad. This next part is real easy. We've got our ESC. This is going to go to our receiver. And these symbols, that top symbol means signal, and then of course positive, negative. So like last time we talked about on the servo, white is going to be signal. get that wire plugged in. White is signal. The other end goes to our receiver, which is oriented this way. So we're going to be plugging into channel 2. Yours may be labeled THR. It's the same thing. If you don't have channel 2 or THR, unfortunately, you're going to need an aftermarket receiver. They're not too expensive. You can find them online. I'm not super knowledgeable about receivers and controllers, so I'm not going to make any recommendations. So got that plugged into channel 2. I don't like this wiring situation, but we're going to do a chassis swap later, so I'm just going to leave it kind of a mess. So we're no longer using this as an ESC, so our motor is not going to plug into here anymore. We're going to use this wire, plug it into the motor, and then the other end to our motor lead, positive, negative. It's 2-pin. So black is negative. We'll plug that in there. So now this is just the receiver. I'm just going to have this sit here. Ideally, and what I will do later on, is try to mount things to sliders. So I typically do ESC. Let's see, I would do ESC on this side and the heavier battery on this side. So you have heavy motor, lighter ESC, heavy battery. Try to balance your weight left and right as best you can. I'm not going to do that at this point because I don't have sliders and I know they're coming with the chassis, which I'm very excited to be able to show everyone. It is unreleased, it's a prototype. Follow me on Instagram. I will be posting about it there to begin with before we do the chassis swap at the end of our C10 build. And now we will plug our battery into our ESC. No longer plug anything into these ports. Everything is through our ESC. And that is, if you remember, our electronic speed controller. So we can test everything before we button it all up. We've got a power button now. Makes a pretty little song. That means it's connected. That light flashes now. Don't worry about it. Power switch doesn't do anything. But you can see we still have steering. But when I pull the trigger, we're going backwards. So our throttle is reversed. You may have throttle reverse on your controller. This one does not. No big issue. This is pretty much everybody has to do this with these ESCs. I see all the time on Facebook people saying I installed my Injora MB100 correctly and now my throttle's reversed. Like, yes, you did do it correctly. Injora, I don't know what you're doing. All you need to do is rotate this plug 180 degrees. So now we're going to plug black into positive. And squeeze the trigger. It goes forwards again. Much slower. I'm just barely squeezing the trigger. And we can get it just to creep. Much nicer slow crawl. I don't know if you've noticed, it doesn't whine anymore. You might have noticed with your truck, it whines when you're crawling with it. This new ESC doesn't have that whine. One of my favorite upgrades because I hate that noise. So that's our external ESC and motor install. I'm going to get the body put back on and we'll go hit the rocks. If you made it this far, thanks for watching. Hope this was useful. Hope it was fun. If you noticed, while you were gone, I added some stickers. Shout out to Bumpy Sticky. That's where I got some of those stickers. The license plate I get from RC Plate Shop. Bumpy Sticky is on Instagram. I will leave a link to his profile in the notes. Hope this was fun. Hope this was useful. As you can tell, much smoother slow crawl. It's got more torque, more power to get over those obstacles. Overall, pretty easy install. Very good upgrade. Next time, I think it's going to be a couple weeks. What do you want to do? Let's do high clearance links and oil-filled shocks. Sounds like a good upgrade. So we will do that in a couple weeks. Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, share, comment, mash that bell. Love reading through all the feedback. If you have any ideas or suggestions for the channel or this build, leave them in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. And I will see you again soon.